Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review my latest book, A Modern Priest Looks at His Outdated Church by Father James Kavanaugh. I first got introduced to James Kavanaugh through his poetry, specifically his book, There Are Men Too Gentle to Live Among Wolves, which pretty much revolutionized my entire view of poetry. His book and the book by Bruce Ensler Moore, which my mother gave me once for Christmas, completely changed how I looked at poetry. And I had written a few poems, but these two men's poems changed how I wrote and set me down a path of writing. And I was an excellent high school poet. In fact, I was one of the class writers in my senior year. There were 4 of us. We had a big class. Every superlative had 4 people. And I am still a good high school poet. I never got any better. I don't write much anymore, and that's okay because, like I said, it's not very good. But I loved James Kavanaugh's work, and I knew he had been a priest at one time. He was no longer a priest when he wrote poetry. He had left the priesthood at that point. And I had known he had written some books about his time as a priest, but I never actually found them. And then recently I found this one, I think at a yard sale or something, for $1 or 50 cents, something like that. So I couldn't pass it up. And his poetry is there in the prose. He has a style that if you've ever read his poetry in the past, you'll recognize it immediately. It is a lyrical quality to the prose that's just really pleasant. I quite enjoy it. Now, this book was written in 1967, and I began to attend a church here in New Hampshire, a Catholic church here in New Hampshire, in 1969, and I stayed with that church until 1978 at age 14, when I left the church completely. Even though I had not been a believer in God since I was 5, I still attended the church because, frankly, I didn't have any options. When my parents were married, I just couldn't avoid it, and shortly after their being divorced, I finally severed my contact with the church because I realized that I did not want to be part of organized faith. I was an atheist, and the famous line, "The Lord is our shepherd, I shall not want," made me think of, I know what they do to sheep. So I didn't want to be part of that faith any longer, so I left. My mother really couldn't argue with it, because shortly after I left, the church said she couldn't be a school teacher anymore, a Sunday school teacher, because she had been divorced, and so in the eyes of the church, she was now a bad person. Yeah, that was kind of like where my mom's connection with the Catholic Church ended as well. Though she's still a Christian, I don't believe she is a member of any faith any longer. But if I had belonged to the church that James Kavanaugh describes in this book, I would have run screaming when I was 6. Okay? My church was very liberal. Even at the time I knew it was liberal. I did not realize until I read this book how liberal my church was. Because the church this man describes is medieval. And I completely believe that this is the church that is the essential default Catholic church across this nation. And it disgusted me. I've never liked organized faith. I have never liked the Catholic Church. I have never had a positive view of the Catholic Church. This book did not help my view of the Catholic Church. It made it worse, which I didn't really think was possible. But this book succeeded at that. I think this book is very important for any person who is a member of an organized faith to read, and anyone who's a former Catholic or a current Catholic, because I think you need to reevaluate why you are a member of this kind of an organization. Because I think this kind of organization is a detriment to our species. It is bad for the human species because they don't do positive things. They keep alive archaic ways of thinking that are not good for us. And this book is also depressing because Mr. Kavanaugh was talking about making some innovative changes to the Catholic Church 40 plus years ago that would have helped make the Catholic Church relevant in the 20th century. They haven't made any of these changes. So that means it's even less relevant now in the 21st century. This was an excellent book. It was a lovely read. There was a couple of chapters which I think dragged a little bit, but overall I really enjoyed it. I find it interesting that whenever he discusses masturbation, it's always in reference to adolescent boys. And one instance of an adult male masturbating because he did not want to have sex with his wife because he didn't want any more kids. Because Catholics can't use birth control. And he never mentions female masturbation. It's like it doesn't exist. I thought that was kind of interesting. And the only time he mentions lesbian relationships is with discussing this with a nun who had begun to have feelings for her fellow nuns. Every other case of homosexuality in the book that he discusses is about men. And it's a very 60s era look at homosexuality, because he even comments about the person coming to him seeking help because they were unable to get any help from their doctor. Well, yeah, there's a reason the doctor couldn't help you, because there's nothing wrong with you. And because you belong to a faith that says there is, doesn't make you wrong, it makes the faith wrong. So, if you're interested in religion, I think this book is a must-read. If you like the book, I would recommend checking out his poetry. If you like poetry in general, check out Mr. Kavanaugh's work. He's very talented, and I thoroughly enjoyed his work as a kid. I haven't actually read his stuff in quite a while. I should probably go dig out my copies of his books and reread them. I haven't read a lot of poetry lately. I'm too busy reading nonfiction. I literally have 300 books in my to-read pile I haven't gotten to yet. It's a 6-foot bookshelf sitting in my library, plus books stacked on top of it. But if you enjoy religion and a little glimpse into the organization that is the Catholic Church, this book will do that.